beyond that. Sam, you've got your hand up patiently. Go ahead.
Thank you. The group Democracy for the Arab World Now, founded by slain journalist Khashoggi, put out a recent statement charging that there's a grotesque hoax by the Biden administration, not just greenlighting, but bankrolling ethnic cleansing. They specifically cite parts of the supplemental that the administration has sought that fund the proposed humanitarian aid to Palestinians who have been displaced from Gaza into neighboring countries. And they also highlight the fact that the Israeli government appears imminently planning a move of Palestinians permanently from Gaza to Egypt, and they cite a leaked Israeli intelligence ministry report along those lines.
So,
what do you have on that?
I
realized that earlier in your comments you seemed to distance yourself from this notion. You said that it was Palestinian land and that you were opposed to this, or that was the implication of your remarks. However, there it is. You're asking for the money to do it.
So let me just be clear about a couple things here, Sam. First, we continue to provide support to Palestinian refugees through the UN, through UNRWA, and the U.S. is going to also continue to support efforts for safe passage for civilians in Gaza seeking safety. As it relates to our foreign policy, the U.S. does not support any forced relocation of Palestinians outside of Gaza. It is not a policy we're pursuing. It is not something that is on the table.
So why are you asking for funding for it?
I don't understand your question.
This group, Democracy for the Arab World Now, founded by Khashoggi, says that you're asking for funding for new Palestinians, not just displaced from 48, not just displaced from 67, but displaced from this conflict from Gaza into Egypt and other neighboring countries. I think it's an open secret that Israel has been attempting.
We're not engaging in any situation in which Egyptian land would be leased. I've not seen that letter, nor am I going to get into the specifics of the funding request to Congress from up here. But forced relocation is not something that we are looking at, or is on the table, or a policy that we support.
I'm asking you about your funding package.
Excuse me, Vedant, thank you. How long of a pause in the ceasefire does the State Department and President Biden have in mind for Israel, in a brief follow-up?
We're not calling for a ceasefire. Okay. That's not policy we're pursuing.
Okay, then following. Why aren't Secretary of State Blinken and President Biden asking Hamas and Hezbollah for a pause in their firing of rockets on Israeli communities?
Don't even know where to begin with that talk. We have, since the onset of this conflict, we have condemned Hamas for their destructive terrorist attacks on the Israeli people on October 7th. We have also been incredibly clear to Hezbollah and any other malign actors that they should not use this opportunity to widen this conflict. And when we're talking about a humanitarian pause, what we are talking about is conditions that simultaneously ensure that Hamas is not in a position in which it can regroup, re-strengthen itself, position itself in a way to further conduct attacks on the Israeli people, while also creating conditions that perhaps will allow for the further provision of humanitarian aid into Gaza, that will perhaps allow conditions that other hostages can be released as well.
Well,
go ahead.
Is still firing.
I've taken two of your questions. Go ahead.
Thank you. Just to follow up on Sam, in March 2021, Secretary Blinken accused China of the crime of genocide for its alleged treatment of the Uyghur minority, but he didn't accuse them of killing on any mass scale or forcible transfer. Now we see with Israel's military assault on Gaza, something like every 200 people in the Gaza Strip has been eliminated. Over 4,000 children killed. The Ministry of Intelligence, as Sam pointed out, in Israel has published a blueprint for the forced transfer of the entire Palestinian population to Egypt. We have the intent to commit genocide expressed at the highest level of the Israeli government, including Netanyahu himself referring to the Palestinian population as Amalek, the biblical Amalek. So I wonder, when you're accusing one country of genocide without accusing them of mass killing, and then blocking ceasefires to enable another country's military assault. What metric are you using to determine genocide, or is this just political rhetoric?
It's certainly not political rhetoric. The department, and I talked a little bit about this yesterday, we have a rigorous process in place for evaluating whether something constitutes as genocide or not, and that is true in any country that that situation might be being looked at. That is not a term that we have assessed pertains to this current conflict. We are, of course, monitoring the evolving situation and are examining facts as they develop. This continues to be an incredibly challenging and fraught situation, but it's also important to remember that Hamas bears responsibility for sparking this war. They have brought this tragic war to Gaza.
Okay, well, President Biden has accused the Russian government of genocide for its actions in Ukraine, where in 2 years it has killed as many civilians as Israel has killed in 1 month in the Gaza Strip. So how do you account for that disparity where you're assisting one country and accusing the other of genocide when the country you're assisting has systematically killed so many more people in 1 month?
Those circumstances are totally and completely not the same, and to make a comparison like that, candidly, is incredibly inappropriate. We have been, please don't interrupt me. We have been, have raised directly with the Israeli government about the need to distinguish between Hamas terrorists and Palestinian civilians. This is something that the secretary has raised directly on his travels. We even laid out that we believe that there are commitments that can be made additionally on dealing with protecting civilian life more effectively. And we're watching very closely to make sure that happens.
But you referred to Palestinian civilians as human shields. Doesn't that blur the distinction between civilians and militants?
We have not referred to Palestinian civilians as human shields. We have said that Hamas is using Palestinian civilians as human shields. That is not hyperbole. That is something that we have seen Hamas do as they continue to integrate themselves into key civilian infrastructure across Gaza.
Wouldn't that be blurring the distinction between civilians and combatants if you say Hamas is using civilians as human shields? Wouldn't that be in some ways justifying the killing of civilians because they happen to be in the way, in their homes?
There is no one in this administration that is justifying killing of civilians. Any civilian life loss is incredibly troubling, heartbreaking to us. Any number above 0 is deeply troubling to us. What we are doing is we are working with our Israeli partners to ensure that steps can be taken to minimize the impact on civilian life. And we also have believed that there is a moral imperative, there is a strategic imperative to take steps to minimize loss of civilian life. I'm going to work through. I've answered like 4 of your questions. You could, yeah.